It arrived without any theatrics. There were no sirens, no cries of despair, no falling into the embrace of unfamiliar faces, merely a phrase uttered beneath the sterile glow of fluorescent lights. It's advanced level 4. Recall. Clutching the rim of the chair, not due to the threat of fainting but rather because I required something to grasp, anything at all. Frank remained unperturbed. My husband had always maintained a stoic demeanor, man who took it upon himself to clear the snow, while the world around him still lumbered. Who among us hasn't let out a curse when stubbing a toe? He nodded at the doctor as if receiving a list of tasks to complete. As we journeyed home, I observed him from the periphery. The illumination filtering through the windshield accentuated the creases etched upon his face. He gripped the wheel tightly as if it were the sole anchor in a world that felt increasingly unsteady. I suppose this is where it all begins, he remarked at last. Words eluded me. What can I express? We had shared 33 years of marriage. We nurtured 2 children. We endured job losses, faced funerals, and navigated that fleeting moment when divorce seemed a possibility, yet we chose to stay together. Upon our return, we settled into a quiet stillness. The unopened mail lay on the counter, drawing my gaze with an unspoken promise of secrets within. He gazed intently at his hands. Later that night, I found myself in the bathroom, tears soaking into a towel. Clamped my teeth together with such force that I left a mark on the tender flesh within my mouth. It was foolish, yet I wished for him to remain oblivious. Somehow I sensed it wasn't merely his life that faced an expiration. The ensuing weeks melded into a haze of checkups, prescriptions, charts, and an ever-growing stack of literature on palliative care. Just uttering that term filled me with the unsettling notion that we had already surrendered. I have decided to resign from my part-time position at the library, not due to his request, yet my thoughts drifted away from the task of shelving book, consumed by the uncertainty of whether the man I loved would be there for Thanksgiving. Frank began to transform, not in a single moment, not in a dramatic fashion, yet the small details. He found himself unable to consume toast without a wave of nausea washing over him. He let memories slip away. He drifted off into slumber, his words trailing into silence. Then arrived the transformation of shedding bounds. The manner in which his jeans draped over him suggested they were meant for another soul entirely. One morning I discovered him attempting to shave, repeatedly nicking himself in the process. With a delicate touch I lifted the razor from his grasp. He offered no resistance. I've just settled in, so allow me to complete my thoughts. Once more tears fell from my eyes that night, not fond of a towel. In the kitchen once more solitude enveloped me, the fridge humming softly as if it were finding a pulse of its own. It was then that the hospice coordinator reached out, informed me that we qualified for in-home nursing assistance. I agreed before her words had fully escaped her lips. Michael made his entrance the subsequent Thursday. Anticipated a woman. Find myself uncertain as to the reasons behind it. Perhaps it was my belief that caretaking was a skill reserved solely for women. Yet there he stood, a man in his 30s, towering in stature, with gentle eyes, and an unsettling calmness that lingered in the air around him. He extended his hand with a confident grip, introduced himself and inquired about Frank. Observed him sitting next to my husband, neither hovering nor fussing like the nurses in the hospital had done. He merely inquired about his feelings, and I awaited the true response. Frank felt an instant connection with him. He doesn't speak in the manner of a nurse, Frank confided to me that evening. Speaks as if they are human. In the span of the following fortnight, Michael made his appearance every other day. He arrived bearing medical supplies and a batch of banana muffins. He paid attention not solely to Frank but to myself as well. He observed the moments when my fatigue rendered me unable to. When I found myself still clad in the same sweater after 4 days had slipped by. It went unspoken. He simply offered me a cup of coffee and instructed, "Take a seat. Can handle this." In that fleeting instant I found myself believing him. On a tranquil afternoon I found myself seated on the back steps, the world around me quiet. As Frank drifted into slumber, Michael emerged, a bottle of water in hand. "Are you all right?" he inquired. I inclined my head in agreement. I then shook my head. "I'm not sure," I replied. He settled next to me, yet remained silent. The wind danced gracefully among the trees, a silent performance that captivated our gaze. The silence resonated with a profound fullness. Was akin to the sweet release of air after a prolonged moment of restraint. In the depths of night I found myself dreaming of Frank, a vision of him in the vibrant days of his 30s, powerful, brimming with passion. Upon awakening I found myself beside a man who bore no resemblance to the figure from my dream, and I felt guilt bearing down on me like an insurmountable weight. On a night in early October, Frank succumbed to slumber in the recliner, oblivious to the call of dinner that never reached. Panic surged through me, contacted Michael. He arrived in less than 20 minutes. Assess Frank's vital signs. There is nothing to be concerned about, merely exhaustion. I lingered close, my hands trembling. Michael glanced my way and remarked, "You need sleep." Unable to allow me to remain, he implored. I ought to have declined. Ought to have been the resilient partner who manages it all. In place of that I brewed a cup of tea. We found ourselves seated opposite one another in the kitchen. Here I am, draped in my robe. He remained clad in his jacket. "Is there someone in your life?" I inquired. He raised his gaze. "Not at this moment." Refrained from inquiring about the reason. I preferred to remain in ignorance. I sensed a transformation stirring within me. I found myself at the age of 56. My husband was fading away. For the first time in years I experienced the profound sensation of being truly seen, not in the role of a caregiver, not in the role of a wife, yet as a female, and that filled me with a dread deeper than the fear of death itself. Michael possessed a unique ability to enter a room without causing a ripple in the atmosphere. May seem absurd, I understand, but that's precisely how it felt. His presence seemed to fold seamlessly into any space he entered, neither overwhelming nor insignificant, as if he possessed the uncanny ability to contribute without ever drawing attention to himself. Following that night in the kitchen, the changes did not occur all at once. Lightning bolt appeared, simply little details. The manner in which his voice softened as Frank drifted into slumber. He lingered at the threshold when I answered the door, inquiring if it was a good time for a visit. He always maintained his boundaries, yet I discovered a yearning within me for him. Do so. Frank's decline had begun to accelerate more rapidly than we had anticipated. His appetite waned to the point of near absence. He started to lose track of the days. Times he seemed to lose track of the fact that our daughter had left home years prior. On a quiet afternoon, he raised his voice. "Amy, where's my coat?" And I couldn't help but smile as I softly reminded him that Amy was now in Colorado raising 2 children of her own. He blinked, then replied, "Right, course. How foolish of me." Yet it was far from silly. It was utterly terrifying. I clasped his hand gently until slumber claimed him, and as I stepped into the kitchen I found Michael already immersed in the task of arranging the pillboxes. He refrained from inquiring about the events that transpired. He merely gazed at me and inquired, "Would you care for some tea?" It evolved into our cherished ritual. Whenever the world seemed to be falling apart, he would present a cup of tea. And for some inexplicable reason, that singular act held me together more profoundly than all the volumes, therapists or circles of prayer ever. Michael possessed a subdued past. Though it wasn't something I sought, he presented fragments bit by bit. For nearly a decade he had dedicated himself to the compassionate realm of hospice care. He had experienced the profound loss of his mother at a tender. Unwed, he expressed a fondness for jazz and the thrill of long drives. Without a specific destination in mind, he brought to mind the sort of man I might have been drawn to had I been in my youth, had I encountered him prior to my transformation into a wife, a mother, a woman weathered by the passage of one evening as we lingered outdoors with Frank in a gentle slumber. He remarked, "You don't share much about yourself." I smiled, though the humor eluded me. "Not much can be said." "That's not true," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "You simply cease to believe that your story held significance." That struck deeper than I anticipated, for beneath the surface he held the truth. Some point I found myself relegated to the role of a supporting character in the narrative of my own existence. It was on a Thursday that I reached my breaking point. Frank experienced a moment of panic. He awoke, breathless, his eyes filled with bewilderment. Panic surged within me as I attempted to soothe him, yet my hands trembled uncontrollably. Found myself unable to recall the location of the emergency medications. Michael discovered them, administered the injection. I grasped Frank's hand firmly, waiting for the storm of panic to subside. Once the chaos subsided, I found solace in the confines of the bathroom, where I sank to the unforgiving chill of the tile beneath me. I held back my tears, found myself seated, an emptiness enveloping me. Remained in that position for nearly an hour. As I swung the door open, I found Michael seated in the hallway. He remained silent. He simply stood there, extending his hand. I did not take it, yet I yearned to. Oh, how I longed to. A night when the power had surrendered to darkness, Frank lay in slumber, and the entire house felt as though it were cocooned in soft cotton. Michael and I ignited the soft glow of candles. Occupied the farthest reaches of the Have you ever contemplated how your life could have taken a different shape? I inquired. Always, he replied. Shifted my gaze toward him. The shadows caressed his features, lending them a gentler appearance. I once sang, I remarked, in the days prior to the arrival of the children. He offered a male. What type of melodies? Criteria primarily Ella Fitzgerald. He inclined his body ever so slightly, a subtle shift that drew attention. Please, share a song. I gently shook my head. Yet I found myself softly humming a few bars of misty My voice faltered, yet he shut his eyes as if he could listen. Beyond the passage of time. As I concluded, he slowly opened his eyes and murmured, "That was beautiful." Something within me fractured, for it had been an eternity since anyone had uttered words that painted me as beautiful, talented, or worthy. And even though I remained still, refraining from reaching for him or uttering a word, my body revealed its secret through a rush of warmth. I found myself in a descent. Gradually, silently, I found myself at a loss for how to bring it all to a halt. One particular night, I observed him as he gently brushed Frank's hair softly with deep respect, caring for a man who was cherished, not merely unwell. Subsequently, he made his way to the kitchen to clean up. I lingered at the sink, feigning the act of washing dishes. I had already scrubbed clean on 2 separate occasions. He advanced with measured intent, so near that I could sense the warmth radiating from him, enveloping me from behind. "Find myself thinking about you," he murmured, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. With deliberate slowness, I pivoted my body. My breath hitched. "Understand. It's not right," he remarked. Yet I find myself unable to cease. My hands were slick with moisture, and I sensed the soap gliding away from my grasp. Gazed up at him, and for what felt like an eternity, silence enveloped us both. Refrained from kissing him. Yet I did not turn my back either. Initially, the day the power went out seemed quite ordinary. The rain had persisted for hours, a soft, unyielding drizzle that saturated the porch cushions and infused the air with a subtle scent of damp. Candles flickered softly in the living room, their glow more for atmosphere than for any real need. It was the narrative I crafted for myself. Frank had scarcely touched his meal. His limbs resembled fragile twigs beneath the blanket. His voice emerged in hush tones, delicate as the wings of a moth. He drifted into slumber around 5 o'clock. p.m., his head tilting to the side in the embrace of his recliner. Michael made his entrance just as the sun slipped away, swallowed by the looming dark clouds. He appeared soaked, yet he uttered no words of discontent. He removed his jacket, brushed off the rain as if it were second nature, and inquired, "How is he?" I merely shrugged, fatigue rendering me indifferent to empty words. Not particularly impressive. We navigated the evening routine with a serene sense of harmony. I had transformed into an instinctive dance. The manner in which we navigated our proximity, the silent cadence we had seamlessly embraced. Before he even had the chance to inquire, I placed the thermometer in his hands. He handed me the medication, his gaze averted. Waltz of fatigue and understanding. Approximately 8 p.m., the lights dimmed momentarily before plunging into darkness. We stood still. Frank shifted restlessly in his slumber, yet remained oblivious to the world around him. Silence enveloped the room, the gentle hum of the fridge and the soft buzz of the heater now absent. The stillness hung in the air, a palpable entity all its own. I found myself in the kitchen, spoon in hand, my eyes adjusting to the shadows that enveloped me. It would be prudent to examine the circuit. Michael opened the drawer and retrieved a flashlight as if he had inhabited this space for an eternity. "I shall go," he declared. Upon his return, he shook his head in disbelief. "It encompasses the entire block. The storm likely disrupted something essential." Thus we ignited the candles. I discovered the hefty urns I typically reserved for power outages and Christmas Eve. We dispersed them throughout the room. The warm, flickering light cast dancing shadows upon the walls. Frank remained in lumber. Michael reclined at one end of the couch while I settled into the opposite end. Between us lies a bowl of untouched soup and a silence that yearns for words to break its stillness. There was a time when I loathed the darkness. I finally admitted. He cast a fleeting look. What is the reason? For a brief moment I paused to reflect, for the future remains hidden from view. He inclined his head with deliberation. What comes next? At this moment I merely shrugged. At this moment I believe it conceals aspects I'm not prepared to confront. The candle light danced gently. The rain fell steadily outside, creating a rhythm that felt almost meditative. Do you long for his presence? Michael inquired gently. Day, I murmured, though he stands just within reach. The details of how we drew nearer escape my memory. It was not an intentional act. In one fleeting moment, our conversation danced around the realm of music. He spoke of jazz while I reminisced about the songs that once filled my lungs, and in the next breath, I found myself unveiling an old CD player, a relic tucked away in the cabinet. He inserted a disc. Gentle, raspy sounds enveloped the space. Shut my eyes, allowing the melody to envelop me like a cherished blanket. It wasn't until he took my hand that I became aware of the tears streaming down my face. Silence enveloped him. Allow me to embrace the stillness. As I gazed upon him, his eyes held no questions. They existed in that moment, simply present, creating a sanctuary, embracing me. Leaned in, compelled by an impulse that silenced my inner doubts. Our lips connected as if they were destined to do. There existed neither desperation nor hunger, only an undeniable need, a longing for visibility, to feel the warmth of a connection that reminded me of my significance. It endured for mere moments, yet I sensed its resonance ripple through every fiber of my being, as if emerging from the depths, gasping for air. As I withdrew, I scanned his expression for any trace of remorse. Moments of uncertainty, I discovered. Either. There's no need to be, he remarked. You sought something genuine. Silence enveloped us thereafter. He lingered through the night. Not in my bed, not within Frank's domain, resting upon the couch. I offered him a blanket, and a smile spread across his face. Appreciate it. That evening I found myself in bed, gazing up at the ceiling. The rain had ceased its relentless fall. The dwelling stood as a sanctuary of stillness. I strained to catch the sound of Frank's breathing from the adjacent room. I attuned my ears to the rhythm of my own heartbeat, found myself questioning whether I had just enacted the gravest treachery of my existence, or if I had merely come to the realization that I was indeed still breathing. Slumber eluded me. With the first light of dawn, the power surged back to life. As I entered the living room, I found Michael already awake, cradling a cup of coffee in the soft, muted gray light. Morning, he said, as if the world had remained unchanged. Inclined my head in agreement. Good morning. We chose to remain silent about the kiss. Not at that moment. Yet the dynamics of our relationship had shifted irrevocably, and the room, the one untouched by light for hours now, bore a truth that neither of us could ignore. The gentle whisper of my name roused me from slumber, not murmured, not imagined, but articulated, lucid, sturdy, a voice I hadn't encountered in weeks. Diana, I jolted upright too quickly. A searing sensation gripped my wrist. The corridor lay shrouded in darkness, yet it was far from quiet. Soft rustling of blankets filled the air, accompanied by the familiar creak of his recliner. "Diana," Frank called out once more, his voice rising in volume. I sprinted. Michael had arrived, positioned on his knees beside the recliner. Frank's eyes fluttered, open, blinking, glistening, yet undeniably aware. "Hey," I murmured, sinking to my knees beside them both. He slowly turned his head in my direction, each movement weighted and deliberate. "Believed you had gone." My breath. "I must decline, Frank. Have arrived. Have always remained." He extended a quivering hand. "Accepted." It seemed to bite with an unexpected ill. Michael lingered for a moment, retreating gently to allow us our distance. I averted my gaze from him. Entirely. In that moment it was solely my husband and I. The man to whom I had pledged my very existence, the man whose existence was now eluding my grasp like fine grains of sand I could not retain. The physician remarked that it was uncommon, yet not beyond the realm of possibility. Instances of insight, concluding gathering, times the body musters its resolve to bid farewell. They may not have articulated it in those exact words, but I understood their intent all the same. Frank remained alert for the majority of that. He took a few delicate bites of toast. He inquired about Amy. Topic. Hand is the weather. He let out a soft laugh as the dog sent a lamp tumbling to the floor. I nourished him as a mother would her child, tenderly and with care. He refrained from uttering Michael's name, and Michael, akin to a specter, hovered at the periphery of the welling stillness. Expert, remote. I loathed him for it, yet I loathed myself even more for yearning for his proximity. Despite everything, that evening Frank requested a transfer to the bedroom. Assisted him in navigating the corridor. Each step felt like an eternity. He rested against me, gasping for breath. As we strode through the hallway we encountered Michael. Frank acknowledged him with a nod. "You have treated her well," he remarked. "I appreciate it." Michael remained silent. He merely inclined his head and continued on his way. My hand shook as I assisted Frank into bed. He gazed at me as if he were etching my features into his memory. "Do you recall the lake house?" he inquired. "Certainly. You had on that white sundress, the one adorned with blue blossoms. Your hair was pulled back neatly. A smile graced my lips. Move brought his." He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "You resembled the essence of summer," and I pondered. "Shall cherish this woman until my last breath." A searing sensation gripped my throat. I pressed my lips gently against his forehead. "You did indeed. You truly do." He shut his eyes and murmured, "Don't be alone after I'm gone." Drops cascaded down my face. Words eluded me. He grasped my hand tightly. "Swear to me," I vow. An hour later, Michael discovered me on the porch. Enveloped in a cocoon of warmth, I found myself gazing into the void. "He's in slumber," I remarked. Michael lingered next to me, enveloped in silence. "Do you suppose he is aware?" I inquired. Michael paused before responding. Then a voice whispered, "He knows you've been here, that you hold affection for him." "That's not my intention." He inclined his head with deliberation. "Indeed, perhaps he does." Gazed at Michael, truly gazed. The man who had effortlessly reached into the depths of my being. The man who appeared each day seeking nothing in return. Find myself lost in the shadows of my own identity. I confessed. "You are a Person who chose to remain, he remarked. Even in the moments it shattered you. For the first time in months, tears flowed freely down my cheeks. Not wrapped in a towel. Disinterested in quietude. Yet, as darkness fell, yet he did not embrace me. He refrained from making contact with me. He simply allowed me to unravel. Frank did not awaken the following day. He drifted back into slumber, never to open his eyes once more. The house stood in silence. The clock's ticking echoed through the silence. The candles from the previous night had dripped and pulled into soft waxen puddles, lingered by his bedside for what felt like an eternity, softly spoken. He immersed himself in the melodies that resonated with his soul. As he drew his final breath, it unfolded amidst the melody of a song. It was the very melody I once cherished and sang. Moments later, Michael entered the room. He refrained from inquiring about the events that transpired. He was aware. Me lingered there, flanking the bed, a man who cherished me for many years. Man who cherished me in silence, wholly, without any demands. And there I stood, caught in the space between, unprepared to make a transition, unprepared to bid farewell. The funeral unfolded in hush. Only family, a handful of close friends, and the pastor who had been acquainted with Frank since our arrival in town. The weather was gentle, tender. Sunlight, a breeze that whispered like a soft breath. I donned navy, not black. Frank had always held a disdain for the color black. Claimed it was overly dramatic. Reserve that for the opera singers, he had once quipped. Michael failed to arrive. I did not request that of him. He was well aware. Solitary white lily arrived, accompanied by a note that read, "He was fortunate to be loved by you." So was I. Carefully folded the note and placed it within the pages of my diary. I have not cast my gaze upon it since that moment. Yet I am fully aware of its precise location. The days following the funeral unfurled like a delicate thread, elongated and fragile. Each day I found myself tidying the kitchen 3 times. The spice rack has been thoughtfully rearranged. Responded to sympathy cards with a touch of mechanical grace. Individuals presented dishes of comfort and well-worn phrases. I inclined my head in agreement, grinned, expressed gratitude to them. The cadence of grief is an unspoken truth, a melody that catches you off guard. It possesses a rhythm of its own. At a pace you master the art of dancing in silence, ensuring that no one perceives your continued motion in a world that seems to have ceased its pulse. Weeks prior, Michael made a single call, only a single time. I allowed it to ring twice before finally answering. He failed to offer a greeting. He inquired, "Are you all right?" No, he refrained from offering any counsel, did not hastily present solutions. He simply exhaled softly on the other end of the line, a quiet presence that eased my solitude. He then remarked, "Should you ever feel the urge to vanish for a time, there's a cabin tucked away in Vermont. There's no need for words. Simply exist." My gratitude was expressed with a simple thank you. Truly meant it. Yet I chose not to attend. I was unable to bench now. Graces the garden, a silent witness to the moments Frank once spent there. Engrossed in his newspaper, in the quiet of the morning I find myself seated with a warm cup of tea. Times I find myself voicing my thoughts. I express to him how much I long for his presence. Express my apologies to him. I express to him that my love endured until the very end. And in that midst I discovered the art of truly living once. Or, it is often said that betrayal comes in many forms. What if the true act of betrayal lies in forsaking your own essence for the sake of loyalty? What if remaining silent in your own existence is the truer betrayal? The answers elude me. I am certain of this. Michael showed me the art of making my voice resonate. Frank imparted the lesson of perseverance to me. Each man cherished me in ways I had yet to discover. I craved in that fleeting, delicate instant amidst the chaos. Surrendered to the embrace of love. Completely. Time has slipped away, leaving years in its wake. Continue to reside in the same house. In the kitchen I find myself humming the timeless melodies of Ella Fitzgerald. Frank's forgotten socks linger in drawers, remnants of his neglect. Kept it from Amy or perhaps anyone else. Was not a scandal. It was no hidden truth. It was simply my own fragment of my tale I cherish like a pearl, nestled within its shell, concealed yet not disgraceful. And occasionally when the breeze shifts in a certain way, I find myself convinced that I can hear footsteps on the porch. Times I find myself turning, anticipating his presence beside me. Yet it is merely the whisper of the wind, or perhaps perhaps it is hope steadfast and unyielding,